Imagine this. You're standing at the threshold of your front door, keys still jingling in your hand, and someone is asking you for a favor, again. They smile with warmth, maybe even desperation. You feel a flicker of resistance rise in your chest, but it dies before it finds words. You nod, you agree, you say, "Sure, of course." Then you walk inside, and something inside you feels smaller. You've done the right thing, the polite thing, the thing a good person does. So why does it feel like a tiny piece of you just disappeared? You sit on the couch, silence, then guilt, gnawing and familiar. Not guilt for helping, but guilt for even questioning why you did. Your smile, your patience, your endless yes, isn't it what makes you you? Wouldn't saying no be selfish? But here's the question no one asks. What if being nice all the time isn't a virtue, but a slow form of self-erasure? What if every time you suppress your anger, every time you bend your will to accommodate someone else's comfort, every time you smile when you want to scream, you aren't being kind, you're disappearing? You don't notice it at first, you're praised for it, rewarded. You're so easygoing, you're always there for everyone. You never cause drama. But deep inside, something festers. The part of you that knows what it wants, that feels rage, that has boundaries, is bound, gagged, and buried beneath the floorboards of your personality. You wear a mask called goodness, you carry a cross called being agreeable, and each time you betray your own instincts to please someone else, you dig your own grave a little deeper. The world doesn't tell you this. The world applauds your niceness. It tells you it's what makes you lovable, safe, acceptable. It tells you that conflict is failure, that anger is ugly, that boundaries are mean. But is that truth, or just training? Ask yourself, who taught you that love must be earned by silence? Who made you believe that your needs are dangerous, your voice too loud, your truth inconvenient? Why does your kindness feel more like compliance than compassion? Could it be that what we call niceness is often just fear in disguise? Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of abandonment? What if your constant need to make others comfortable is rooted in your own discomfort with being seen, truly seen, unfiltered, unapologetic, imperfect? And what if the world has no real interest in your authenticity, only your obedience? There is a terrible paradox hidden in our social fabric. The more agreeable you become, the more invisible you are. And the more invisible you are, the harder it becomes to even remember what you actually feel. You begin to laugh on cue. You apologize when you're the one hurt. You compliment people who drain you. You say, "It's fine," when it isn't. You become an echo of everyone else's desires until your own voice is unrecognizable. And yet, if you were to stop being nice, what would be left? Who are you beneath the smile? What happens when the mask cracks? Would people still love you if you stopped performing? If you said no without explanation? If you let your anger show? If you walked away instead of staying silent? Would you still be good? Would you still be worthy? Would you still belong? This is the great contradiction you carry. The very thing you do to feel safe, people-pleasing, self-erasure, emotional suppression, might be the very thing slowly destroying you. You have spent years learning how to be acceptable, but never once were you taught how to be whole. And so now you're here, exhausted, resentful, conflicted. You've built a life on the illusion that your worth is tied to your sacrifice. But a question begins to bloom in the back of your mind, a dangerous, liberating question. What if being nice isn't who you are, but who you were forced to become? And if that's true, who are you when you stop trying to be good? It begins before you even know who you are. A toddler reaches out for what they want, loud, unfiltered, primal. But then the gaze of the adult arrives, stern, expectant, disappointed. The child withdraws, learns, adjusts. Not to become better, but to become acceptable. This is the first wound, the first fracture between desire and approval. Psychologists have a name for this process: conditional love. You are not loved as you are. You are loved if you behave, if you smile, if you don't cause trouble, if you become who they need you to be. You shrink to fit into someone else's mold, and so begins the long, invisible training in being nice. Carl Jung called this disowned self the shadow, the parts of your psyche you had to bury to survive. Anger, sexuality, ambition, rebellion, wildness, truth. all of it shoved into the basement of your being so you could wear the costume of the good child, and over time, the mask fuses with your identity. You forget it was a mask. You become polite instead of passionate. You become passive instead of powerful. You nod instead of roar. But here's the tragedy. The more you perform niceness, the more you lose access to your own authenticity. And without authenticity, what is left of you? Friedrich Nietzsche warned of this hollowing out. He saw how morality, when hijacked by societal expectations, turns the vibrant soul into a tame, obedient shadow of itself. He called it slave morality, a system built by the weak to control the strong. In this morality, assertiveness is arrogance, honesty is rudeness, individuality is selfishness. You learn to bow before the altar of social harmony, while your soul quietly bleeds beneath the robes of decency. But who benefits from this obedience? Certainly not you. Certainly not the person silencing their truth in exchange for approval. It is society, its institutions, its hierarchies, its faceless expectations that gain power from your submission. Aldous Huxley warned of this soft totalitarianism. In Brave New World, people are not controlled through violence, but through comfort and conditioning. Pleasure replaces purpose, niceness replaces authenticity, and nobody questions the system because everyone has been trained to prioritize peace over truth. And yet the cost of this peace is enormous. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer understood the quiet despair that lives beneath the surface of conformity. He believed that much of human suffering came not from the world, but from ourselves, from our inability to face the truth of our own nature. But facing your nature, your hunger, your chaos, your darkness is dangerous in a society built on appearances. So you keep the mask on, and it fits so tightly, you forget where it ends, and you begin. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once said that when a person's life lacks meaning, they do not seek truth, they seek comfort. Being nice becomes a sedative, a way to stay anesthetized in a world that terrifies you with its rawness. So you say yes when you mean no. You suppress your truth because it might cause tension. You avoid your own needs because they might make others uncomfortable. You silence your voice to keep the peace. But at what cost? The cost is self-alienation, the slow drift away from your true self until one day you wake up and realize you don't know what you want anymore. You don't know how to feel anger without guilt. You don't know how to say no without explanation. You've become a stranger to yourself, polite, pleasant, but profoundly lost. This is not kindness. This is compliance. There is a profound difference between kindness and niceness. Kindness is rooted in strength, in presence, in authentic care. Niceness is rooted in fear, in appeasement, in avoidance. Kindness says, I will tell you the truth because I care about you. Niceness says, I will tell you what you want to hear because I fear your disapproval. And yet society doesn't reward kindness, it rewards agreeability. Think of how schools, workplaces, even families operate. The ones who obey are rewarded, the ones who challenge are labeled difficult, the ones who cry too loud, want too much, burn too brightly, are pushed to the edges. We live in a culture that elevates politeness over passion, manners over meaning, but the soul was never meant to live in a cage. Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote that hell is other people, but what he meant was deeper than it seems. Hell is the self you're forced to become in order to be accepted by others. Hell is the eternal performance, the smile that hides the scream, the nod that masks the rage. And so you live in quiet torment, performing a self that earns approval, while burying the self that longs to be free. But eventually, the shadow begins to knock, at first softly, fatigue, sadness, resentment, then louder, outbursts, anxiety, shame, until one day it breaks through in ways you can't control. Sudden anger, burnout, emotional collapse. Not because you're broken, but because the mask you were given no longer fits the face beneath it. It doesn't announce itself with a bang, it seeps in quietly, like smoke under a door. The slow corrosion of your will, the hollowing out of your no, the dimming of a light you didn't even know you carried. That's how it begins. This inner death we call being nice. At first, you don't notice the damage. You tell yourself you're just tired. that it's a busy week, that you need to recharge. But the truth is more disturbing. Your exhaustion isn't physical, it's existential. It's the fatigue of living in a state of constant self-abandonment. You've trained your nervous system to put others' comfort above your truth, and that wiring has consequences, neurologically, psychologically, relationally. Let's begin with the brain. The human mind was not designed to live in a constant state of suppression. When you eagerly deny your own needs, silence your opinions, and fake emotional responses to keep others happy, your brain experiences chronic dissonance. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for decision-making and self-awareness, is forced to filter every instinct through a lens of, will this make me likable? Over time, this leads to what psychologists call self-alienation. You no longer trust your own instincts. You hesitate before speaking. You second-guess your boundaries. Your identity begins to dissolve into the expectations of everyone around you. The result? Anxiety, depression, resentment, the slow, unbearable ache of not being allowed to fully exist. But it doesn't stop with the mind. It bleeds into your relationships. You become the person everyone turns to because you never say no. You become the fixer, the pleaser, the peacekeeper. People like you, but they don't know you. And deep down, you know it. You sense that the love you receive is not for who you are, but for the role you play. That if you stopped performing, the approval would vanish. So you keep performing. Even as it poisons you, you smile through mistreatment. You accept half love and call it gratitude. You remain in conversations that drain you, jobs that hollow you, relationships that exhaust you, because the thought of asserting your truth feels dangerous. This is no accident. Our culture reinforces this dynamic relentlessly. We call it professionalism, we call it maturity, we call it emotional intelligence. But often, it's just emotional suppression, and we celebrate it. We teach children to be polite, even when they feel violated. We tell women to smile, even when they're angry. We tell men to be strong, even when they're breaking. We reward those who perform emotional labor at their own expense. But here's the twist. The world doesn't respect the endlessly agreeable. It uses toes. People don't admire your endless patience. They expect it. They don't appreciate your sacrifice. They depend on it. They don't see your boundaries as noble. They see them as obstacles. And when you finally speak up, when you finally say no, the reaction is often shock or anger. Why? Because you've trained the world to expect your silence. And now your truth feels like a betrayal. This is the trap. The more you erase yourself for others, the more invisible and resentful you become. But it gets worse. Over time, your self-worth becomes fused with your usefulness. You don't believe you deserve love for existing, only for serving, only for pleasing, only for making life easier for everyone else. This is how you become addicted to being nice. Yes, addicted. Like any addiction, it offers short-term relief. Praise, approval, safety, but the long-term effects are devastating. Every time you silence yourself to avoid discomfort, you reinforce a dangerous belief. My truth is too much. My needs are a burden. And that belief becomes a cage. You stop dreaming, you stop creating, you stop feeling fully alive. And here's the most heartbreaking consequence of all. When you are always nice, no one ever learns how to love you. They only learn how to love your performance. You may be surrounded by people, but you are profoundly alone. Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." But what happens when who you've made of yourself was never you at all? What happens when your entire identity is a collection of social adaptations crafted to survive a world that punishes truth? You wake up one day and realize you've built a life around being digestible, palatable, pleasant, safe, but not real. And reality, true, raw, imperfect, unapologetic reality, is the only thing that can sustain the soul. Without it, you're just a ghost in your own life. Rebellion doesn't always wear black leather and raise its voice. Sometimes it looks like this. You, alone in a room, staring into a mirror for the first time in years, and realizing the reflection isn't you. It's who you became to be safe, to be loved, to be approved. The rebellion begins here, not with noise, not with confrontation, but with a quiet seismic shift inside. You decide to stop betraying yourself. It sounds simple, it is not. Because for years, your nervous system has equated truth with danger. Your muscles tighten when you say no. Your heart races when you voice an unpopular opinion. You've been trained neurologically, emotionally, socially to equate self-expression with threat. So how do you break free from something so deeply embedded? You start small, but you start honestly. Learn the difference between guilt and betrayal. The first time you set a real boundary, you'll feel guilty. The first time you speak your truth, you'll feel selfish. The first time you stop cushioning your no with apologies, you'll feel cruel. That's not your conscience, that's your conditioning. You're not hurting others, you're rescuing yourself. If your nervous system panics when you speak up, congratulate yourself. It means you're finally reprogramming the system. Guilt isn't always a sign you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it's a sign you're finally doing something different. Say no without explaining. This is the litmus test. If you can say no without offering 1,000 reasons or softening it with a smile, you are no longer ruled by the approval of others. Most people won't like this version of you. Let them not like it. Let them question it. Let them leave. If your truth costs you people who only loved your silence, it's not a loss, it's a revelation. The people who matter will adapt. The ones who relied on your compliance will not. Both outcomes are liberating. Make peace with being misunderstood. This is the cost of authenticity. Some people will distort your truth to protect their comfort. They will call your hose nasty rudeness, your boundaries ego, your clarity arrogance. Let them. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That privilege comes with a price. You must become immune to the noise of other people's discomfort. You are not here to explain yourself into palatability. You are here to become real. Anger is not the enemy. You've been told your anger is dangerous, unattractive, unspiritual, uncivilized. But what if your anger is sacred? Nietzsche believed anger was not a defect, but a signal, an inner flame pointing toward violated values, repressed truth, or caged potential. Your rage isn't something to fear. It's a part of you calling out for wholeness. When channeled, it becomes fuel, the kind that burns away masks and ignites transformation. You don't have to act out your anger, but you must listen to it. It's trying to return you to yourself. Speak even when your voice trembles. You don't wait until you're fearless. You speak while afraid. You hold boundaries while your hands shake. You disappoint people while your heart aches. Because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the mastery of loyalty to truth over comfort. There will be moments when you falter. You'll fall back into old patterns. You'll smile when you don't want to. You'll say yes when you meant no. But you'll notice, and that noticing is power. That awareness is how the mask begins to crack. Redefine what it means to be good. You've been taught that goodness means obedience, humility, and sacrifice. But what if real goodness means wholeness? What if the most moral thing you could do is become undivided? To live in a way where your inner life and outer life are aligned. No more hiding, no more twisting yourself to fit into boxes that were never made for your soul. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote that most people do not want truth, they want illusion. But you now are choosing something else. Not illusion, not parfum or mass, but freedom. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop being nice and start being real, you don't become cold or cruel. You become available to real connection, to honest love, to meaningful boundaries, to the kind of life that can only emerge once the pretending stops. Let your no become sacred. Your no is not rejection. It is self-definition. It's a sacred line drawn around your integrity. Each time you say no with clarity, you say yes to something deeper, your values, your energy, your truth. And over time, that no becomes a signal to the universe. I will no longer abandon myself to make others comfortable. This is the rebellion. It's not loud. It's not chaotic. It's intentional, terrifying, liberating. It's not about becoming unkind. It's about becoming whole. You were not born to be agreeable. You were born to be true. There comes a moment, often quiet, often alone, when something inside you breaks. Not in the way you feared, not like shattering glass. It's softer than that, like a paper mask disintegrating in the rain. The mask called nice, the role you've played for years, the identity you wore like armor, gone. And in the silence that follows, one truth rises up through the dust. You were never being nice to protect others. You were being nice to protect yourself. This is the final truth. The core realization beneath every yes you didn't mean, every smile that hid pain, every nod that concealed your real opinion. It was never about them. It was about the unbearable fear that if you showed up fully, unfiltered, unpolished, unapologetic, you would be rejected, abandoned, unloved. This is not weakness. This is trauma. It's survival. You didn't choose this out of cowardice. You were conditioned to believe your true self was a liability. From childhood, from school, from culture. You learned early that being honest might cost you love, and so you learned to be nice instead. Niceness became your shield, your camouflage, your passport to belonging. But now you see it clearly. You have paid for that belonging with your truth. And without truth, what is love? What is connection? What is life? What good is it to be liked by everyone if you cannot stand yourself? What good is peace with the world if it comes at war with your own soul? This is the moment where everything changes. Because now you see what was hidden all along. Being nice is not love, it is fear wearing the costume of kindness. And when fear runs your life, no amount of approval will ever be enough. No amount of praise will satisfy the ache of self-abandonment. No external peace will quiet the storm of a silenced voice. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But here's the revelation. The terror is not in who you are. It is in the moment before you decide to stop hiding. After that, there is no terror, only freedom. A freedom so raw and unfamiliar, it almost hurts. Because for the first time, you are no longer performing. You are being. That's the real revolution. To be as you are without apology. Not as a rebellion against others, but as a reunion with your own soul. And suddenly, things begin to shift. You no longer feel the need to fill every silence. You no longer explain your no. You no longer panic when someone disapproves. You begin to trust the ground of your own being. And something astonishing happens. You become magnetic. Not because you're agreeable, but because you're real. People feel it. The solidity of someone who is no longer seeking approval. The calmness of someone who does not betray themselves. The radiance of someone who knows who they are. And ironically, the love you spent years trying to earn by being nice begins to arrive only when you stop needing it. Because now, you love yourself. Not in the shallow, self-help cliché way, but in the ancient, powerful way of someone who has returned to their own truth. You no longer ask, what do they want me to be? You ask, who am I when I am no longer afraid? And the answer is breathtaking. You are not the smiles you faked. You are not the approval you chased. You are not the peacekeeper. You are not the apologizer. You are not the caretaker of other people's comfort. You are a wild, luminous, imperfect, sacred being, and the world needs that version of you. The version who speaks truth even when it trembles. The version who sets boundaries with grace and steel. The version who is generous from wholeness, not obligation. The version who knows kindness without truth is manipulation. Love without boundaries is codependence. Peace without self-respect is surrender. This is not easy. This is not comfortable. This is not always nice. But it is real, and that reality will save you. You will lose people. Yes, you will disappoint those who depended on your silence. Yes, you will feel guilt, grief, confusion. Yes, but something else will emerge in their place. Integrity, not moral superiority, but alignment. Your inner life and outer life no longer contradicting each other. No more pretending, no more performing. You wake up and realize you are finally you. Not the self you crafted to avoid rejection, but the one that always lived beneath the surface, waiting. And as that self steps forward, you feel the most powerful thing a human being can ever feel. Peace. Not the peace of comfort, not the peace of politeness, but the peace of a soul no longer at war with itself. This is what awaits you. Not a world where everyone likes you, but a world where you like yourself, where your yes is sacred, where your no is clean, where your silence is intentional, and your voice is a storm of truth and love braided together. You've spent so long trying to be good. Now, try being real, and watch how your life transforms. Because when you stop being nice and start being whole, you don't lose love. You finally make space for the kind of love that doesn't require your sacrifice. You finally come home. And for the first time in your life, you belong, not to the world, not to the roles, but to yourself.